All right, we'll wait for a few more to jump on here, and then we'll get started. Sorry for the delay. For some reason, it wasn't like loading the screen. It said it was on there, and then I refreshed it, and then it went back to the old screen. So didn't take or something. I'm not sure why, but should be. I tested it. Should be up and live now. Just wait for a couple more people to jump on, and then we'll get started here. Excuse me. All right, we'll go ahead and start then. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video. If you are on a smaller screen like a phone, if you're on a larger screen like a computer, it should be to the right of the video. So we'll start here with Rod S says, the box drill in the 20-minute shallowing fix, doesn't it force your takeaway to be inside the plane instead of straight back? Well, it wouldn't. If you make it really aggressive, yeah, it will force you to go a little bit to the inside, but there is a little trick to go about that. So basically, if you're not familiar, the 20-minute shallowing fix, there is a drill in there, where Clay uses an impact bag. I don't have an impact bag in here. This box works fine. You don't have to have an impact bag. You can use just like a cardboard box, just like this. But basically, what you do is you take the box and you put it. I think Clay says like 2 grip widths. So 2 of these grip lengths behind. So I'm not going to put that far behind because it will go out of the frame, but that's like a grip length or so. And basically what this does is it forces that path to be from the inside. But you're exactly right. It can definitely get in the way of your takeaway if you have a takeaway that's more in line or outside your hand. So there is a little trick to get around that. So what you do is you get in your setup here like you normally would, and then just take the club and already kind of put it behind it, right? And then you can start your swing from there. So basically, you put the club where you would normally have it, kind of in the path where you'd have it, right? So if you have a takeaway that's way outside your hands, you might put it here and then start the swing from there. If you have a takeaway that's kind of more in line with your hands, you might have it about here and bring it back. If you have kind of an inside takeaway, then this is totally fine. It's not likely going to bother you. But yeah, that's a little trick to getting around that. But yeah, you're exactly right. It will get in the way. So if you just do that little trick, you can still do the drill very easily and get that club to, basically force that club to work from the inside on the downswing. All right, keep the questions coming. While you all are coming up with questions, I'm just going to be, checking emails and stuff. So if you got questions, bring them on. If not, no worries. All right, so John R says, "Hi Q, I watched the videos about bunker play and it has been really helpful. Are there any adjustments to make when you face an uphill lie in the bunker?" Uphill lie is actually, if you're in a greenside bunker, that is a nice thing to see because it makes it a lot easier. It's easier to get it up higher out of there. So there really isn't any adjustment you have to make. It's just to understand how the ball is going to come out. The ball is going to come out higher generally if you have a higher or if you have an uphill lie. So you just hit the bunker shot the way you normally would. The main thing would be, go with the slope. Really, if you ever have any slopes, you just want to go with the slope. So what does that mean? Well, if I have a level lie, right, in a bunker shot, my spine is going to be, just a little bit angled away because that's relative to the ground, right? I might even be a little bit vertical because I'm going to get my weight forward. So when you get your weight forward, it makes your spine get a little bit more vertical. You could be a little bit angled away. So this would be kind of like my setup. Like if I was to hit like a normal kind of bunker shot. So wider stance to give me a little bit more stability. It also helps me to get lower to the ground because I want to get this club lower to help it more easily move through the sand. It also helps to not have the face pointing out to the right too much because if I lower my hands, my face is going to get more square, right? So I'm gonna widen my stance so I can get low. I'm gonna have that face a little open, right? And then from there, I'm going to kind of lean forward a little bit. My spine is going to be straight up and down to maybe slightly angled away. And then I'm just going to really focus on hitting that spot right behind the ball, right? So if I have an uphill lie, I'm really just going to do the same thing, but you can just imagine now everything's going to be more tilted away with the slope. So if this is how I am for a level slope, right? If I have a slope that's more angled away like this, then I'm going to be more like that, right? So now I'm going to be a little bit more angled away. When you do that, when you have an uphill lie, it's going to tend to come out higher. And that's usually a better thing, right? Because it's easier, especially if you're kind of short-sighted, it makes that a lot easier. Now, downhill lie is the opposite, right? If I have a downhill lie, that's a much more difficult bunker shot because it's going to come out lower and it's going to make it harder to stop. And, a lot of times, when you're on a downhill lie in a bunker, a lot of times you got to hit up over a lip, and then it just makes it really, really tough. So an uphill lie, that's an awesome situation to have. That usually makes it a little bit easier. So Reg N says, "What do you think about keeping your weight on your lead side throughout the swing? No pressure shift as a method to make more consistent ball first contact. I assume you would lose some distance but gain better contact." Yeah, if you really struggle with making ball first contact, that could be a way to go, but it's just not going to be very powerful. It can be a way to kind of hit your iron shots and hit shots that are off the ground, but you're definitely going to lose some power. The reason why you're going to lose power is because you're not going to be using the ground as much. You're not going to be shifting as much momentum to create speed, basically. So basically, you're kind of staying on your lead leg here, and then kind of staying there. The key there, though, is you have to stay there. When I see a lot of people try to do this, they still hit it. They still hit it chunky because they do what I call a reverse weight shift, where they get here, they load into the lead side, and then they feel like they're too far forward. So what they do is they back up out of it, right? And then you just end up chunking it anyway. So it's totally fine if you want to kind of have your weight forward and then kind of move into it. I would move into it. And I like to see people continue to get their momentum moving forward. So if you're going to do it that way, what I would like to see you do is I'd like to see you pretty balanced at address. And then when you go up to the top, lean, get your weight forward. And then when you come into contact, continue to get your weight forward. Because if you just go all weight forward, you're going to tend to fall back. And that's kind of the drawback to it. This is essentially how I hit a lot of wedge shots, right? So if I'm hitting like a little pitch shot, I'll have my weight forward, I'll bring the club back, and I'll just continue to kind of keep my weight moving forward. Like my weight never moves away. My momentum's always moving toward the target, right? If you want to swing powerfully, you want to get your momentum moving away from the target to start the backswing. So that way you can get more momentum to move toward the target in the downswing, and that's going to allow you to create more power, right? So there's pros and cons to it. You just got to make sure, just because you keep your weight forward doesn't mean or I should rephrase that. Just because you feel like you're keeping your weight forward doesn't mean you're going to prevent chunk shots, right? You can still hit a chunk shot with your weight forward. There's other factors that lead into hitting chunk shots. So, so it's not kind of like a foolproof plan. Like you're definitely going to make better contact when you do that, but it can definitely lead to better contact. I would like to see basically. I would only really like to see that as a last resort for a full swing shot. I love it for like shorter, like distance wedges, shorter swing shots, bunker shots, that sort of thing. Chip shots. I love keeping the weight forward and making sure that we kind of keep it there and we always kind of have that momentum moving forward. I love that for those shots. I do the same thing, but for a full swing shot, I would like to see a golfer just move the momentum away, because typically people struggle with chunk shots because the momentum's just moving in the wrong direction. And then they get their weight forward and they still have the same problem, right? Where their momentum, because they sense they're so far forward, they start moving their momentum away from the target as they come down. And that's the exact opposite of what you want. Pretty much any swing that you take, you want to get your momentum moving forward in the downswing, other than like a chip or sorry, not a chip, a putt or something like that. We don't want to be moving our momentum around. But for pretty much any shot other than like a putt, we want to get our momentum moving forward. And if we have everything forward already, there's no way to, it makes it harder to get your momentum forward because you're already forward, right? It's like, I can't remember what Super Troopers. I don't know if you've seen the movie, but it's like the cops are messing with who they pulled over and they told them like, pull over. Well, they're like, I'm already pulled over. I can't pull over anymore. It's kind of like the same thing, right? If my weight is forward, I can't get my weight forward more because it's already forward, right? So what you may tend to do is you may tend to fall back. That's the only kind of drawback to it. So if you're going to do that, you just got to make sure that you do it in a way that's actually going to help you. So John R says, can you describe the right arm in relation to the shoulder turn, especially on the backswing? Yeah. So basically what's going to happen is your right arm is going to raise, right? It's going to move away from you. So this is abduction, where it moves away, right? So it's going to raise and move away, and then it's going to externally rotate. So that's like losing the arm wrestling contest. That's basically, there's going to be some combination of that in the backswing. So again, it's going to raise, it's going to externally rotate, and it's going to abduct a little bit, right? So that's that there. That's the top of the swing. Now, the good part is that you don't need to think about all of those things, and I highly recommend that you don't, because you can't really think about, okay, raise my right arm, externally rotate. You can't really do that. So what I would try to think about is at the top of the swing that I'm just a waiter holding a tray. If I do that, if I go to the top of the swing and I do that, I'm going to have my arm in a pretty good spot, right? That's going to put me in a good spot. What we don't want to do is where people get off track with the right arm is where they get it to where it's too much. We actually start internally rotating, right? Now I'm dumping the tray, right? So that would be kind of that flaring elbow. Now I'm dumping the tray, right? So I want to get to where I got that tray, molding that tray nice and level. So if I had some drinks on here, right, I'd be in a good spot. That's where I want to be. That's going to put you in a good spot. So if I go do that with the swing, you see that's a nice spot there. It's when we get that it becomes a problem. It's also when we tend to fold the arm too much, right? So we go up to the top and then we're kind of doing this. And a lot of times that's accompanied with this as well, with the internal, too much internal. But again, that's going to dump. You're going to have a hard time from here. I want you to hold that tray above your head. That's kind of the position that you want with that right arm. That's going to put you in a good spot to be able to make a good downswing from there. All right, keep questions coming. We got about 30 minutes or so. All right, so Mike K says in the 20-minute shallow fix after you finish the first couple drills and you are trying to hit it straight, does it matter where in the backswing you try to cup your lead wrist? Well, you wouldn't necessarily want to cup your lead wrist because that's typically going to lead to an open club face. So, if you have a really strong grip, you can have a little bit of cupping in the lead wrist, but it's not usually. So if I have a really strong grip, right, generally at address, I'm probably going to have a little bit of cupping in my wrist, and that's just going to be maintained throughout the swing, right? So you either don't want to cup your wrist at all, or you're going to have that cupping in the lead wrist basically at address, and then you'll just maintain that throughout the swing if you have a very strong grip. But you'd have to have a pretty strong grip to be able to accommodate a cupped wrist, a cupped lead wrist. So John R says, I was practicing chipping the other day and was having issues into the grain on uphill lies. You and everybody else, man, that's a tough shot. It was catching the pitching wedge and flubbing the shot. Should I use a less lofted club, or is there a better setup for the shot? You may find it easier to use a less lofted club. So that's why whenever trying to think of what tournament, there's several tournaments that have, it's usually when they do the Florida swing. So I think Bay Hill has some pretty, grainy, Bermuda that's around the greens. There's a couple other spots. I think when they do the Florida swing, a lot of those courses have that. So yeah, you'll see a lot of those players they'll putt them, right? They'll putt those, putt shots that they maybe wouldn't normally because it's a little bit more difficult, right? Chipping into the grain because it does want to grab the club. You'll see them hit hybrids and 3-woods and stuff like that. And you could also use like an 8-iron or something like that. But yeah, you just have less margin for error because it's just going to grab the club if you hit a little bit behind it. So it's more, you can try those kinds of shots. So basically, I don't have like a 3-wood or a hybrid in here. But basically, if you imagine like this is just a big 3-wood, it's a driver, right? If I were to do that, I basically have this club a little bit more upright, right? I'd stand closer to it. I'd grip down as much as I can, and I would almost try to do like a putting stroke, right? And that is usually a better deal. Now, if you have to kind of go up and over something, again, you just have to be much more precise with. You just have less margin for error. You got to be more precise with where you're hitting the ground. So generally, for the technique and the setup for that, what I like to see is feet close together, a club head or so apart. The reason is that if our feet are farther apart, we're going to tend to want to shift our weight. So if we have our feet closer together, we're going to tend to be able to control the bottom of the swing easier, which is exactly what you need to do for this shot, right? So yeah, feet close together, ball position, middle to a little bit back of middle to kind of to try to get ensure a little bit more ball first contact, right? I'm going to have a pretty neutral shaft. So my hands will kind of be in the middle of my body. Right, so that puts the shaft in a pretty neutral position. And then I don't like to see a lot of wrist hinge with these shots. I like to see you kind of controlling it more with your body. When you look at typically the best short gamers, like Luke Donald and Steve Stricker, players like this, you just don't see a lot of wrist hinge, right? It's usually minimal wrist hinge, soft hands, and it's more kind of turning the chest back and through with the body, right? That's usually what you're seeing. So that's the kind of technique that I would employ. Make sure that you're not moving your body down toward the ground. Really just try to get that ball right off the top of the grass there, and you'll be a little bit more successful with it. So Mike K says, sorry, I meant how you bend your lead wrist like you do in the first drill. Cupping was the wrong terminology. So again, you don't need to. Here's what I recommend doing is I would look at the wrist angles that you do naturally and then use the grip strength that accommodates that, right? And it's only really if you have extreme cupping in that lead wrist where you would maybe need to like work on getting rid of that a little bit. But this idea that we have to bow the wrist, hit good golf shots, couldn't be farther from the truth. You absolutely do not. If you have a strong enough grip, you do not have to bow the wrist. So I know that that's not your question, but I'm just trying to help you the easiest way possible. So the only time you would to have a pro level type swing and to in bow your wrist would be if you have a weak grip. So if you have a weak grip, like a Colin Morikawa, like a Victor Hovland, like a John Rahm, like all these golfers have weak grips. You know, in order for them to get into a great impact position, they have to bow their wrist to square up the face. Because if I were just to take the club like this and just push the handle forward, well, look what happens to the club face. It gets wide open, right? So if I do that, I have to bow my wrist to square that up. But if you have a strong enough grip, you absolutely don't need to do that. So if you look here, if I'm like this, weak grip, I push my hands forward, I have an open club face. Now you can see I bow the wrist. I have now I have a square club face, right? Now if I go more toward a neutral grip, right, and I push my hands forward, I keep that wrist angle. Well, I can just have a flat wrist at impact with a neutral grip and have the club face square. If I have a strong grip where my lead hand is much more on top, right, and then I have that shaft lean, right, I push my hands forward a little bit, and if I square up that face, I actually have a little bit of cupping in my wrist, right? So that's what I would recommend doing. Now, if you want to have a weak grip and you want to bow your wrist, it really doesn't matter where in the swing you do it. It just means it just has to be happening at impact. The ball doesn't care where you do it in your swing. But I will say, when you look at the players that do it, most of them are doing it at some point in their backswing, right? So if you look at them at the top of the swing, their wrist is already bowed. So I haven't really seen any good golfers who have weak grips that bow their wrist that have a flat or cupped wrist at the top. They all are bowing. They all have the wrist bowing at the top. So so yeah, you need to do it in the backswing somewhere, most likely, to be able to be successful with it. But again, you do not need to do that. I don't recommend that you do. I recommend looking at your swing. So I look at your swing at the top, and I would see what your wrist looks like. If it's flat, I would go with more of a neutral grip. If it's bowed, a weak grip would be best. If it's cupped like that, then a stronger grip would be best. And if it's really cupped, you probably need to have a stronger grip and work on having it less cupped at the top to have the club face in a good position. All right, we got about 20 minutes left. If anybody has any questions. Mike Case says that explains it very well, much better than the video. No problem, Mike. Appreciate glad to help. So Kevin B says hitting the ball and then the turf is very hard for me to envision. I tend to miss hit the ball or hit the top of the ball. So what the way I would kind of look at it is the club comes down in an arc like this, right? We need the bottom of this arc, aka the low point. We need that low point to be in front of the ball on the target side, right? In front of the ball a few inches and then slightly below the ball, right? So if my fist is the golf ball here, that's what we would need. The club is coming down on this arc. It hits the ball in the turf roughly at the same time. It continues into the turf, reaches a low point, and is still in the turf and then comes out of the turf, right? That's what's happening. So that's really the way that you want to envision it. If you're hitting the top of the ball, then what's happening is you're not getting this low enough. We got to hit the ground, right? If you're mishitting the ball, right? Now you could be having this club coming down on a great arc, but you could still hit it on the toe or the heel, right? So I would just kind of look at, if you're making, I would use the feedback tools, kind of like what Clay talks about in the Ball Then Turf Masterclass, right? Or I guess I'm not sure if you're going. For some reason, I presume that you were going through that. But what I would do is I would use something like a divot board, right? So divot board, that's this guy where you can see where you're hitting it in relationship to where the ball is. If you don't have one of those, you can pick one up on the resources tab of the website. Just sent you a question about hitting ball first. Yeah, I'm guessing you have a little bit of lag. So that's why you're probably not watching it 100% live, if I had to guess. But anyway, but yeah, that's what you want to envision. So I would use some feedback tools. If you're doing it outside, you can scratch a line in the turf and then put the ball on the line. You can take foot power spray and spray a line on the ground, put the ball a little bit in front of the line. So that way you can see where you're hitting the ground in relationship to the ball. So if you're hitting the ground in the correct spot in relation to the ball, but you're still mishitting it, well, that's not a ground contact issue. That's a strike location issue. I'm hitting it off the heel, hitting it off the toe. So you can take that same foot power spray and spray it on the club face and see where you're hitting it on the club face. So you could be talking about two different issues there. So if you're topping it, most likely you're just not getting the club to the ground. We got to hit the ground. If we're hitting the ground, but we're not hitting the ground in the right spot, then we need to work on hitting the ground in the right spot. If you're hitting behind the line, you need to get your weight shift more forward. If you're hitting too far in front of the line, right, then you need to not get your weight shifting so far forward, right? Now, if you're hitting the line in the right spot, right, or you're hitting the ground in the right spot and you're still mishitting it, then that's because you're not hitting it on in the center of the face. So I would use some foot power spray to see where you're hitting it on the face. If you're hitting it on the toe, then change your intention to hitting it on the heel. If you're hitting it off the heel, then change your intention to hitting it off the toe. All right. Yeah. Don't need to repost. I see everything. I see everything on there. All right. We got about 10 minutes left here. So Kevin B says, can you help me with setup? I would love to hit a draw, but have hard time with swing thoughts. If you want to learn to hit a draw, what I would highly recommend that you do is work through the 20-minute shallowing fix. That course is all about basically getting you to hit a nice, powerful draw. So, I mean, there's lots of ways to set up, right? What just needs to happen is the club needs to be working from the inside at impact with the face a little bit closed. So if you do that, you're going to get the ball to draw. So what I highly recommend that you do is work through the 20-minute shallowing fix to get to that course, click the instruction tab, and then click the 20-minute shallowing fix from there. Some things that I would make sure that you do in your setup would be to make sure that you're angling your body away from the target. If our body is angled toward, if we're kind of set up like this, right? If we're set up like this, right, you're going to tend to want to come over the top. I would also try to make sure that your ankles, knees, shoulders, all of that is square to maybe even a little bit closed off, especially if you struggle to swing from the inside. Because what I find is people who struggle with slices, a lot of times they're set up, their body's kind of opened up, right? My shoulders are open. When I do that, I'm going to tend to come over the top. So if I feel like everything's kind of closed off and I have some good spine angle, that's going to enable you to more easily attack that ball from the inside. Doesn't mean you necessarily will, right? It's just going to make it a lot easier. It's a lot easier to attack that ball from the inside if our body is closed off and if we have spine angle versus if our body is open and my spine's leaning toward the target. That's going to make me want to come over the top when I do that. So that's what I would be kind of looking at with the setup. And then Clay talks about having a stronger grip. If you get through drill number 1 where we're trying to get that ball to hook, right, then we know that the club face is close enough. John R says, thanks for the explanation on the right hand. I was preventing it from rotating. My practice swings feel a lot less restricted. Awesome. That's great to hear. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thanks everybody for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to y'all next time.